Great. We'll start with some slides and then we'll probably have to switch back and forth between some of the interfaces. So there might be a bit of gap there. Um, but yeah. So as you know, like I'll just do a quick intro of Ethic and myself first, and then we'll go a little bit through the agenda, and then we'll just go kind of almost straight into it to the extent possible. So as mentioned, I'm kind of from a data science background for quite a while now. And that's what I was doing very much before starting Ethic. And at Ethic, what we're focused on um, is building this Copilot for data scientists and for generally people who work with data. And I think as we will be apparent from the presentation, it's clear why I guess a separate tool is needed for this type of workflows and this type of I guess development tasks. They're not like building an app. Like it's a bit different. And obviously, there's app in our area. It's still quite different. Um, and this is our tool, but I'll have the QR code at the end as well. And of course, we're always happy to take feedback from the community, and we're kind of put it back into our product. So just a quick kind of overview of what we'll be talking today. So we'll go through just high level, a little bit of the types of copilots or coding assistants and kind of their relevance to the space, starting from broad to a little bit more niche or specific. Then a little bit on where they fit in the data and data science lifecycle. We won't focus on that too much, just to give a bit of context. Then we'll do a quick live example if I've managed to figure out how to, to switch windows in Zoom. Um, then we'll kind of go a little bit more into, I guess, in a sense, like theory of it, but also just to maybe give a flavor as to like why some copilots work in certain ways and why others work in other ways, and I guess what each of them are suited for as a result. Then a bit more examples, and at the end we'll focus on, I guess, trustworthiness and a broad other category. I think for a long time in our space, like we've been looking towards AutoML, and I guess it may be or even AutoDS, like if there is such a thing. Um, and the co-pilots are kind of bringing that, or the agents, let's say, are bringing that back up, right? And then hopefully we can have some good questions, and make it a bit more interactive. Cool. So we've gone through this. Okay, so speaking of coding assistants, so obviously we're all familiar with these guys. I guess it's very much a mix of copilots and agents right at this stage, and pretty much everyone is using whatever they feel comfortable with. Um, I think for sure there is a very good place for them in the data and data science workflow. I think it's just a question of maybe how and combined with what else. These are extremely powerful tools, so for sure, we love them. Now there's a second layer, which is more, in a sense, you have these big players that are in the data space, like Databricks or Snowflake, that kind of almost felt obliged to bring their own assistants or agents to the fore because they feel like, they they have to do it. Um, so there's some kind of mixed feedback on them. But certainly like a great idea, right? To have a co-pilot or an agent that is kind of understands in theory the platform within which they operate and kind of very tool um, or like platform reliant. But again, so far the feedback has been a bit mixed. They certainly do have an obvious place, like when it comes to Databricks, for instance. Um, it does help from point of view of understanding a lot more about the data context than some of these guys for obvious reasons, right? Because they are being fed some of that context, but still some how should we say it? Um, starting pains, let's say growing pain, maybe is the wrong word. And then you have like data and data science specific co-pilots. These are just some examples. Obviously, like I'll put us in there as well. But we have now, and they're known. They're kind of more like a data engineering, data analyst type co-pilot, which is very much like DPT focused. Then you have positron, which I think is, like great. I mean, it's a great tool. It's really a great tool, and it comes from kind of that R background, right? So that's kind of that was their initial focus, and it's like it's a full ID. And for us, we're an extension, and we're, I guess, so not a full ID. And our angle is more around controlling what some of the other guys are doing, or like helping our users understand what they're doing in Cursor and the other co-pilots. Okay, in terms of and okay, apart from this, you still have quite a few agents, and what we'll kind of run through some of them quickly at the end. Some of my favorite, or the ones that I've been looking at quite a lot. But you do have people like Vincent or so forth. Um, that are more, like they have a slightly different setup, but in essence, they're slightly more specialized, maybe, but they're doing very similar things as these other copilots. Now, in terms of so we are going, this is maybe the part of the talk that is not kind of my most favorite, but I think if there is a framework to be done on these workflows, then maybe this is it, maybe it is not. But I guess there are different levels at which AI-assisted coding can be used at each of these stages, but the stages are obviously never quite um, clearly split. So when it comes to the initial stages, the people like consider that the SQL problem has been solved, but unfortunately, the business logic there, problem, business problem, the business logic problem there has not been solved. So I think that's kind of a maybe misnomer. Modeling, like feature engineer, I think we have um, good applications in this case because it is very like copilots are very good at writing like good code, like code according to some solid software engineering practices, let's say. So this is, I would argue, pretty okay. Modeling, this is where we're heading into AutoML and so forth. Deployment and monitoring, still a bit. In theory, they can do it, but in practice, no one kind of trusts them to. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly move to an example, and hopefully you can see my screen. Um, but can you see like cursor right now? Can you see an ID or not? Maybe. Okay, let me make sure that I share the right screen. Okay, cool. Let me. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so it's great to do. The issue with AI assisted coding is that live demos are are very exciting always. So I'm gonna put a quick prompt which is taken from um, I don't even think I made a prompt, right? So this is not a kind of prompt writing kind of presentation. Um, So I think I've asked one of the co-pilots to format it. But essentially, so this is just as a quick description. So obviously this is cursor, right? So I would say I can't think of a kind of main copilot that is an ID and is not VS Code based off the top of my head. Maybe they exist somewhere out there. But a lot of them, yeah, this is kind of what you'll see, and it's just gonna be a different name and obviously slightly different functionality. Um, so I'm just gonna ask it for. So I've set it up, I've set up my virtual environment and everything. I think that's not very interesting. So I'm just gonna give it this prompt, right, to just build like a quick. You can read it hopefully here on my screen, or I can show it to you on my. Oh, I can't switch. Oh, so it's just gonna Um, uh, yeah, so I've just asked it, because Iris is such a well-known data set and you can just access it, doesn't need to play around with anything. I'm just asking it to build a pipeline to that extent, right? So, and it's, I give it the, I also have a pre-done file I'm not going to debug this live. Um, so as you can see, like super quick, right? Like, okay. It looks fine. It's giving me a great, wonderful explanation of what it thinks it did, which I'm sure it's not it's pretty good because I mean this is literally like the most done data set with the most code on it in the world probably. Um, so but now let's see a little bit how this looks like. Like what's the logic, right? So we can look like when we can look at the code, you can see a lot of functions here. Oh wow. Um, that's gonna be interesting. Um, and let's see, first I'm gonna run it. Let's see if it does run. And if not, I'll just switch to one that it made like 5 minutes ago. Oh yeah, it did. It did kind of run it. Let's see if I can get a representation of this. Um, okay, okay. All right, this is not actually terrible. This is pretty logical. I'll show you one that it did like recently, right? So okay, it for those of you who read the code, I guess this is it. Who prefer the code, you can do it, but this is a nice representation. So it did okay, but then yeah, what are these things here? I am getting a little bit confused. Okay, it's doing pretty well. I would say this diagram, you can quickly tell this is all a live demo. It's doing better than it did, like I was saying when I was initially trying to give it the same prompt. I'm just gonna quickly, I'm not sure if why the scalar happens twice, but okay, some small issues, let's say. I'm just gonna show it what it did before because I think this is a slightly better example. Um, and you see, so it's a completely different pipeline. Let me just second, let me just restart my panel. I'll just give you a few examples of the different. Okay, let me just go into my virtual environment again. So it did pretty well. I'm gonna show you um, a human iris as well. Hold on, let me show you the one he did before. This is this looks very specific, very software engineering like, right? So I don't know if you remember the previous one. Let me scan it quickly. So same, very different views, and it also looks there's something dodgy happening here basically, but I can't tell off the top of my head. Um, This one, a lot of functions, right? It's all function driven. It's a bit complicated unnecessarily. Let me show you. Right, so just loads of functions. And then I'll show you a human one, which is not necessarily the perfect one. It's just human. It's just, a human. Um, and let me just reload this 1 second. Sorry. I'm changing environments when I open the new files for some reason. By the way, I'm demoing on the Windows, which if something works on Windows, then we know it works on anything. Um, okay. All right, so this is the human one, which hopefully works. I'm not sure if it's human, but at least it's kind of someone looked at it. before today. So you see, they all look a little bit different, right? So there's a certain a certain vibe that I don't know if you can tell. So this one is a good example. This one looks much more like what a data scientist would come up with, actually. This one is what maybe an engineer would come up with. And this is, I guess, the human version, which I would hope is a bit cleaner than the this one. See, so it just has these things hanging out, hanging, which I'm not sure why. Okay. Now, this was a quick example, and I guess my point was let me go back to sharing the other screen. I'll share my presentation. Okay. Um, and my point was that, I don't know if you've noticed the type of lineages you had for each. Like one is clearly, um, they each have different logic, right? So unless you quickly understand, like this is a very short pipeline with only like, I don't know, very few lines of code that is produced very quickly and very, in a sense, well. But to really understand what it's doing and what the problem, if there's any problems, that you have to really look at what the things are. And I'm just um, and this is like the kind of transition to the next section, which is around like the theory of it. First of all, like it comes up with different ways of doing it, every time. And then I just want to point out, Cursor like is great on looking at your code base, right? So some of the I try to keep the environment a little bit clean so that it doesn't actually look, it doesn't get too confused, right, for the purpose of this demo. Um, or it doesn't get too tainted by, I guess, what I was previously running and so forth. But Cursor is great at reading your code base and kind of tailoring to your style, right? So that's something to mention, but that's more like a cold start. So what we saw was a cold start type of thing. But it's still keeping that in mind. Let's if we look at the different the different lineages you saw, if you just remember it, then from a theoretically point of view, it kind of makes sense why they would be like that, right? And like there's kind of three elements that matter, right? So the first is the foundation models themselves, which frankly are pretty amazing, as we all know. Second is the data, which is the bit where it's kind of um, not something that Cursor used in that example. But of course, if you ask it to, it can, right? But it's not something that it's natural for the coding assistants unless it's a data specific one. And third is the setup. So um, and sorry, I should have said before in the live example, usually like, it's about comparing, we can compare accuracy and that's fine. But in reality, like accuracy does matter, but the logic is probably a little bit more, outside the Kaggle competition, the logic is probably more important that it's like, like the model is trained on the right thing, is tested on the right thing and so forth, right? So we're all kind of hopefully in agreement with that. That's why looking at accuracy may be less important, but looking at the logic and what it's actually doing kind of more important. But okay, going back to the kind of quote unquote the theory bit, right? So first on the foundation, so these are the three elements that I guess are important, right? So the foundation model themselves, the data, which is kind of lacking in the example I just showed you, and the setup, right? So the setup of the because the foundation model is one thing, and the coding assistant and how it handles the model versus how it handles the search and like the prompting and everything, like it's a different topic, right? So now with the foundation models, which are like, truly amazing, but if you think about it, right, so that's why I wanted to show you the different kind of logics and like kind of the logic a human will come up with versus the logic coded, not coded, this is Cursor in different, iterations would come up with. Um, it's because like the majority of the code is kind of not really data sciencey or data workflow type code, right? So like the proportion is much more, understandably, most of open source has nothing to do with data. Um, the and so the code itself for data science is much less proportion, and the data that like things like Iris, that's how everyone knows it, right? Like all of them, like it's kind of the most done, right? And there's a lot of public sources as well, but at the same time, the majority of the data that I think coming from our sector we use on a regular basis is not really something that's public or that these LLMs have been trained on, which makes sense because of the ways they've been set up, right? So no issue on that, but it's just that they are missing some levels of information, right? Um, now, and if you think about it, it's almost like you saw in those two diagrams, one was done, which in my opinion is much more similarly, and is the one that Cursor did when I did a live demo, that was much more done on um, this type of style that, like a data person would have, and the other one was much more done that I did previously, where it was like no, it had no context of like, there was no code base ready for it to look at. There, it was much more done the way a software engineering would do it, much more functions and so forth. And of course, because the majority of people that impacted these models, they don't necessarily come from the data world. Um, Cool. Now, the second part is the data, and this is just kind of mainly for me not to switch screens too much. But if you think about it, right, so one type of tool, so like it goes through so um the coding assistants, right, Cursor and all of those guys, they search through your code base semantically, which makes 100% sense for, if you're building an app or building like for super complex systems. And generally for code, it makes, yeah, that's the right way to search. But if you are using data and for a data workflow, right, the information that is in the data itself is probably more important than the code, right? So the code is kind of quite empathetic, as we might disagree on that or not, but it's fairly, I would argue, empathetic. And then the data is more important, right? So when it comes to the interpretation of like how when it comes to like trying to incorporate data, if you start to do it like via cursor and you ask it, oh, don't forget to look at iris and see if it's like, I don't know, if it's like balanced, and don't forget to do this and that and that. Okay, you can have a really long prompt to remember all these things, but fundamentally, the way it searches through, maybe existing pipelines or it's just not, it's not this, it's not, it's semantic, right? So it's a bit on the um, left-hand side of the screen is not like a, let's say, a graph search. It doesn't need to be a graph search, but it doesn't necessarily go through the data to see, okay, so this function creates this data set, or this data set is manipulated by this function, um, and then this is what happens to it, or it's manipulated by this function because this is the properties of the data set to begin with, right? So I guess um, this kind of follows through. So it is in a sense the fact that the data itself doesn't really play a part in like the model being trained. The data doesn't really play a part in the majority of like the traditionally such a misnomer, but traditional coding assistants way of like searching through the code base, right? It's not their primary way of being. Um, so this brings us into kind of the setup situation. Like again, we have all of these, the majority of the co-pilots, or maybe you have like the ones we've talked about, maybe you have some enhanced ones where obviously you have everything happening in the sandbox, and you maybe have an agent that goes and looks at some of your data and like does some processes of it, and then you have like these niche agents, but fundamentally they all start from the point of view of like a semantic search, right? That's kind of um, you know um, well, not necessarily, but like an LLM that maybe triggers some form of, like LLM slash semantics that may be happening at the same time. And then it triggers some action on the data set, retrieves information, and like does this kind of ad nauseum, right? So the data is not, the primary thing. So I guess the idea is that in this space, like the two have to be much more merged. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time to make sure that we're doing well. Right. So I think as we all know, it is about the problem that we normally look into the space. It is about data and code, but also I'm going to kind of try to describe it in a different way as well. So this is a simple script, right? And it is very simple. It's less than the whole thing, right? It has less than 200 lines of code. And this is really what's the visual representation of it. And you've seen the implementation for the code logic for Iris as well, for that simple pipeline, right? Um, it just, this is a simple quote-unquote script, right? It just keeps going and going and going. Like the complexity is really not about the script because there's just like 200 lines of code, maybe less. The complexity is about how all of these data sets are created, like how each of them have their own particular way, and there's a reason why that function was applied on them. And there's like, millions, billions of combinations of like, billions might be a lot, but like let's say millions combinations of the properties in a data set and then the function that is associated with that data set, right? And this kind of children parented type, well, lineage type view. And now, so the idea is that for a true a copilot or some sort of agent that truly is for this space, right? And comes at it from both sides, both the data and the code rather than just the code, which is the primarily, shall we say, way of being of the current copilot. There has to be the consideration of the linking of this data. This is the problem in a sense that that it has to be solved. Like there needs to be a way to search through these various combinations of data and code, and like first you gotta like link the right data, the right piece of artifact with the right function that produces it, because otherwise you're kind of blind. And then secondly, once you have this information, once you have the data, then you can start navigating through it in a interesting way, right? In a more interesting way. Okay, I'm just gonna take like a second to set up this demo. And I'm gonna go back to just the slides while I'm doing this in the background. Close cursor. Just I need to set up to put in some API keys for it. Um, um, sorry, just literally 1 second. Cool. Okay, let's go back to sharing, and hopefully I haven't forgotten some key step in my workflow. I have to say live demos or not demos, whatever it is, live examples, let's say, are not, the easiest thing for me. Okay, so here I have a different, slightly different set. It doesn't matter to be, I could have used cursor, but I wanted to show more than one. Also, I don't mind codecs at all. Some people don't particularly like it. I certainly don't know more than it, I would say. So I always, quite open. So this file is called dupes.py because it has some duplicates. I don't fully remember, the logic of it and stuff like that, but I'm just gonna ask Codex to dedupe it. Let's see, I'll just ask it the exact same thing before, but maybe it learned something since, I ran this earlier. Okay, let's see what it does. And then I'm gonna try the same thing using, I guess, the more kind of controlled approach, right? So look at it. Oh gosh, it doesn't have access to some things. Hopefully not. Hopefully it will find a way, right? So I think you can see, and like if you maybe are using it on a regular basis. Okay, all right. This might not work live for some reason. Um, which case I'm just gonna find We're gonna give it like a small amount of time and um okay, it couldn't find the actual file. Okay, no, sorry. Okay, let's see. Mhm. Let's see what it comes up with. Right, I'm gonna try to change it back. 1 second. Let me just correct. 1 second. Let me just set it up differently. 1 second. I love real life demos. So maybe we'll skip this one for now because it's not quite doing. This is the this is part of the issue with the uh, the Copilot world. They are quite hard to reproduce. So basically, yeah, this makes it a little bit trickier. But I'm just gonna go back to sharing my deck, and then we can maybe go to the this demo at the end. So this is the bit where um, it kind of talks about some of the risks and limitations, and I guess maybe what I experienced just now is definitely my fault, but also a little bit part of the risks and limitations. In a sense, it's the uncertainty, right? The expectations, right? So, Codex in its um, great wisdom, like it kind of changed, like it's hard to actually repeat. It's not deterministic, right? So that's kind of the main issues. So as a result of that, the uncertainty is a little bit high depending how these things are set up. That being said, they are great, don't get me wrong, but there is a little bit of uncertainty there. So this is kind of the disclaimers usually you get, right? So apart from hallucinations, with the wrong business context, and like some data privacy issues you might have, but I would say the main issue is like around some of this uncertainty. And we're gonna go to Twitter for some amazing examples from this guy who I don't really know. He's not someone I know, but this is some of the experience he's had, and I think it's um in a sense, even with models improving very much, is that bit of control that maybe it's not kind of very clear um in the in some of these coding assistants, right? So especially for some of our workflows. That being said, like you can make it super complicated, like in terms of the prompting, but then what is the point in the end, right? So this is some of this issue. I'm just gonna let you kind of even have a read. So basically, he had some sort of problem. He loved it at the beginning. I mean, surprise, surprise. I mean, he should love it by the end too, in my opinion. Um, and like he did really well, great implementation. But the problem he was having, and I'm just gonna go to this a little bit faster. So it was around like making up some of the data, right? So we see the hallucination issue here. And it's around kind of it's not so much uncertainty. I think obviously once you realize that it's making things out and you can ask it, oh, please don't make it up, then it's super easy to just um like it will do in a sense sometimes what it's told. According to this guy, it doesn't, but it often does, right? But then what's the point if you have to figure that out yourself, right? So that's kind of it's kind of misplaced expectations. So he, in the end, he didn't like it very much. He was just put off by the fact that I think the key element is like the trust, right? And I think this is where like this argument is getting a little bit more, I would say it's harder for me to make, and I think it's kind of maybe not necessarily hard to understand. I think we're still kind of getting our heads around like how can you have trust in a place in this kind of situation, right? Like the uncertainty. Like there's a reason why like live demos like maybe you know are a problem in this instance, maybe just for me, but actually for other people as well. But it's not just about the demo, it's like the real life work as well. So the issue with trust is that there's a lot of things at play, right? So if let's say um you don't have a view, so cursor produces or codex produces whatever it feels like it, and there's no way you can kind of double check what it did, then obviously there's like the trust isn't there. Then the other issue is like if you use and that was the demo I was actually gonna do. And I probably will just do it at the end. If you use another coding assistant to help you QA and debug, that's definitely a way forward. But then how do you check that coding assistant? So in a way, there has to be an element where there is a bit of reality kind of at stake there, right? So I guess our thesis and where we're going with this is that if you start producing this kind of representation that I've shown you before, so this kind of representation or the lineages, right? So the one um, on the right hand side, then you start getting a feel for what the logic of the code is, and not only that, like you start linking specific, like this code produces a variety of artifacts, right? You start capturing the artifacts, and unlike you start capturing the art, you're capturing them correctly, and then you know that you're linking the right artifacts with the right function. And when I use the word correctly, I don't mean correct in some sort of like magical kind of way. There's no correct way, right? I mean correctly in the sense that it's deterministic, right? Like you don't get a surprise. Like it doesn't, if you have the same code, it looks the same time, the same, you capture the same things. If you have the same code that produce the same things, you capture the same things and link them to the respective piece of code every single time, right? So that's what deterministic in this instance obviously means, right? So our thesis with what we're building is that you have this, the moment you have this foundation of logging, which comes from, I guess, the MLOps world, then you can start having a little bit of trust in it. And that's why I did really want to show you the demo after all. So maybe I'll just spend like a minute trying to reset it up, if that's okay. So apologies about that. Cool. Okay, so I made a different, basically the same. It's the initial file, right? I just wanted to make sure that hopefully you all can see it, right? So I have this file, right? So I'm testing it different ways, right? So one of them is testing it with codecs, and I'll show you that bit later. Um, or actually maybe it's already stored what it came up with. And the other way is around testing it with something that is based on this deterministic link, right? So I guess from my point of view, the question we're trying to answer is like, what level of certainty can I get from this thing, right? Because I want to work super fast, but I also want to have the most control I can, right? So like that's kind of where we're trying to, figure it out. And I think we're figuring it out with the community, not by ourselves. Everyone has a lot of ideas, so I'm hoping to hear some from you as well. Okay, so whatever, there's some tests here, right? Let me find out. This is a duplicate issue, so in the interest of the demo, I'm gonna run the exact issue. Um, and let's see if oh gosh, I love doing this um, in a live demo. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. All right, so now the agent, so basically our framework is, you bring your own API and stuff, and that's why I always have to put in the key. Um, okay, so you have this, you have this agent that's trying to, okay, it's picked our agent, let's call it, in LLM based functionality that's trying to pick up what happened, right? And so the idea is that you're starting to test through the different, so it starts obviously to where it found the issue, and then it tests, okay, where did the issue come from? Because it can do that, because it has very clear paths, right? Like in a sense, you can see what it's doing, and it's not that it can see what it's doing, but you can definitely see what it's doing. And then it comes up with some, code to fix, just like, and with some explanation. But the key difference here, right, or the key thing that we think is important is that the search happens through this graph, right? So then there's a different level of visibility, maybe is the right word, um, or control that you start having because you can kind of interact with what it's producing, and you have a bit of more idea of what's happening, right? Versus the codex thing, which is actually very good. I mean, for me, everything is very good. I don't, I do still interact with code and data, but maybe not as much on a regular basis as I should. So this is the one that I ran initially, and it actually picked up on in my code on something that I hadn't picked up in my code. Like, like not that this is not actually my code, but that I hadn't, I had looked at the code. It's only what, 10 lines. I didn't actually pick it up. So I was pretty happy with it. But even though the file was called tubes, it didn't pick up on the tubes, right? So that's a problem, but it did pick up on an issue that I hadn't, right? It picked up on a great code issue. But the problem is then, like sometimes it would, sometimes it sometimes does, sometimes it doesn't. There's just a high degree of uncertainty, right? So you just want to find some sort of not harness, but find a way to control it. I think going back to the presentation, hopefully I'm sharing the right screen now. Um, this is the trustworthy bit we talked about, and I think that's kind of the um, from a data point of view, like from I think it kind of does shine a little bit more at in our space than maybe in other spaces because imagine if like it's not applications are not very simple to build either, and there's a lot of issues with them coming from just using um, coding assistants only. At the same time, um, the level of uncertainty is a little bit lower because in a sense it either runs or it doesn't, and that's like a good indicator of things. Maybe it's not quite fit for purpose from a specification point of view, but then the test can really follow the specifications, right? So I think it's a little bit more clear how it can be more effective. Whereas I think in our line, probably this data piece makes the trustworthiness be a little bit more important. Is kind of my take, but obviously that's a slightly more personal opinion. Um, I just want to finish on this note. So obviously we covered a few things, even had some demos running more or less successfully. I mean, demo is the wrong word. showings of these some of these examples of assistance. But I guess the end, I think this is something that's like a completely different direction, but I do want to bring it up because I think it's very important in the space. So I think maybe I want to say 5, 7 years ago, right? Like certainly pre-ChatGPT, like there was a lot of focus on AutoML, not so much auto data science, to be honest with you. Now I think we're seeing agents in the data science space that are a little bit more like that, like AutoML. So I think now this is coming back. It's like it's like fashion. So obviously with agents, like you do have, and I'm a fan actually. I'm a fan of the MLE Star. I think Google partly just kind of not just, but they do want to showcase their ADK. Um, so that's why they're putting up these agents, right? But either way, it works from my point of view. I think there's some great agents out there that, they're scoring on the benchmarks and so forth. And I think probably AutoML is again making an appearance. It'll be interesting to see how it develops, but that's also like an area that I think is worth kind of talking to and considering when we talk about this space, right? So yeah, that's in a nutshell. We haven't really, sorry, I probably should have said all the bits with Lineage, right? So there are tool, right? So if you want that kind of representation and what we're trying to do sign up for it. We have this offer for the events we do. So please do connect with me as well if you want to. Um, and yeah, just happy to take kind of feedback and all of that. So we have a Q&A session, right? Maybe now. Hopefully we have some questions. I don't know.
There were a few questions asked in the chat.
Okay.
If you would like
Yeah.
to read through them, I think that.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, let me um oh wow, okay. Okay, where do we go? Oh, there is a difference, yeah. Yeah, for sure. There is a difference. I would say. I think from a I think um agents are more, I would say, niche, right? So they have a goal in mind. And like I was saying, the MLE agents, right? So their job is to basically be like a great Kaggle master, right? And they're just like, building these amazing models or what they think is amazing models. And they have a great, they're actually more agents like, you know, combined. Um, and you might have a feature store agent actually. I'm surprised there isn't one because I would say that that's kind of an important that would be quite a big agent, I think, to build. Whereas the co-pilot, they're more like you work with them, right? So they kind of maybe like the traditional view is autocomplete. I don't really use co-pilots for autocomplete, so I can't really help you with that. But you might just ask them some, like it's more like a prompting kind of style kind of situation. Yeah. Okay, next one. Is this an ID? Um, so cursor is an ID. Our tool is an extension, actually. I don't know, because we want to make our own lives a little bit harder, I think, but our users' lives a little bit easier, right? So if you wanna, so obviously I can open. I would have to open a new one. I would have to open it. Um, so I'm not sure which bit you're talking about, but oh no, sorry. Let me just open cursor again. So yeah, cursor is an ID and our tool is an extension in short, right? But I don't think I'm sharing any. So let me just go back. Yeah, right. So extension ID. Um, cool. Where were we? Sorry, I lost my many windows. Yeah. Okay. Where are we? Okay. Oh, sorry. This is a big. Is there okay? Was there okay? Maybe ask. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So you're absolutely right. Whoever suggested like the SVM and others, I think that's absolutely the way you do it. But I think my point is, uh, it will. I think Cursor and the assistants will do a great job actually improving the pipeline with what you've asked it to. I think the problem is that when you're out there in the wild in an actual, maybe not even a small company, the code will be too much. So that's the bit that you will be struggling with, right? So that's why, and the diagram is correct because it's deterministic. So spoiler alert. Yeah, so yeah, is it correct? The diagram is correct. The code might be wrong, right? So but at least you have one piece of information that you know is right. Okay, something about the recording. I don't know. When you say copilot, you really mean agent? Yeah, so this is kind of this theoretical debate. I think it moves from, like the space moves from like uh literally just APIs into an LLM through to like enhance prompts and context, right? Like what Cursor and like most of the co-pilots are doing, through to agent, which is like one prompt, but there's no reinforcement learning there, through to like actual reinforcement learning, which frankly, um, I think MLE Star is trying to do. Yeah, right. So yeah. So no, I don't think I mean agent. I think this is kind of the range, but everyone is just using everything. Okay. Um, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, so LME can be trusted with data pipelines. Yeah, so unfair, but also like, a bit harsh, but fair in a way. I think it's just like it is the uncertainty element, right? So I think they're doing amazing job. Like I really they're like I'm not a great coder. I don't really enjoy writing code. They're great. They really are. Um, they just need a bit of help, right? And they need a bit of supervision, let's say, right? And I think that's what needs to, and I think that's controlled by a human. Yeah. Again, so we're a code extension that works for any VS Code environment. And the so it's a deterministic framework that has kind of agents or prompts on top, right? So some of when we create code, that's not deterministic, but when we link the code with the data, that is, because that's the bit we feel we added the table, right? And we do want to release it to people as an MCP as well, so they can do whatever they want as well. Um, okay, there's some more message. Is there any other bootcamp or documentation or link to follow? Yeah, sure, I can put it in the message if anyone wants to. Let me just grab my link, which I don't know by heart. So I would recommend using that QR code because then uh we'll basically give you more time for free. So why not, right? I mean, if you want to use it, might as well. But if you don't want to use the QR code, that's also the link, right? You can just go and try it right now. Yeah, so I would say reduces the risk of hallucination. So the tool, like it does like your coding assistant or even like or whatever data science might still hallucinate, but you will catch it is my point, right? You will catch it, right? So that's kind of where it helps. um yeah, not Google Colab, but you can use it in Jupyter Notebook. um cool. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So to be honest, like the person that said you could have taken a fork of VS Code for it, it would be much, much easier for us to have taken. It is incredibly painful to like extensions are harder than it is to just do an ID, but we wanted people to be able to use it with other stuff, right? Because that's kind of part of the ecosystem, right? That's why I do like Codex in a way because I can use it wherever in theory, right? I'm not going to use it on Cursor probably anyways, so maybe it's pointless, but like I can just try different things and it's a bit more open, right? So, but I do take your point. We might kind of have to do a fork in the end because we're adding more and more functionality. It's pretty heavy. We can't see what. Okay, the QR code. Okay, I can share my. Sorry, I can share my QR code again. 1 second. There we go. And also, this is my link, and I'll add the link to the docs as well, so that it's a bit. Sorry. Interesting. Why is my docs not working?
You don't need to reshare the link. We shared it for you.
Okay, cool, cool,
Everyone
cool.
should be able to see it now.
Great, great. Okay, cool. Okay, let me go back to the list of questions. Where were we? Okay. Okay, all right. Yep. Do you think this extension can guarantee no hallucinations? Yeah, so this is my point. So unfortunately, LLMs will definitely hallucinate, but this will help you catch it, right? So it's a different, it's not like, oh, we have some filter that we put on the response that an LLM will give, and all of a sudden the response is true, right? Especially with code, that would kind of like it wouldn't work because you need the data, right? So it's kind of pointless. But um, what it can do is it can help you um, spot the logic errors and where basically the data doesn't match at all what they wrote, which is a lot of the time, unfortunately, because we don't work on iris.
We
Okay,
have one last question asking if you can show the trust slides again and relevant codes if there is any.
show the what? Sorry.
The trust slides.
Oh, the trust slides. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure they're like the best slides, but okay, which slides do you want? Do you want the story or these are some of the issues, right? They're not all of them, but I'll say that it's more like a feeling of uncertainty that is the problem with our use case. Because like I was saying, like in for more core software developers, right? If it runs, and that's great. But for us, it can still run and just come up with really bad numbers really bad predictions that no one cares. Yeah. Sorry, I just saw another point. Yes, I agree. And if you have some suggestion for us, is about how to make it less confusing. It's also not an extension to Cursor, right? So it's a VS Code extension and a Jupyter Notebook extension. And it also works on Cursor because Cursor is a VS Code fork and so is Windsurf and so is everyone else, right? But we're happy to rename it, right? Like it's not a problem for us. I don't think you know. But the idea is that it gives you a framework on which you can use these things better. Yeah, you can
Oh,
definitely do that.
thank you so
For
much,
sure.
Veronica.
Great. Have a great I don't know what it is I think it's evening for all of us, right? So
Yeah.
for some of us it's not, but okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you so
Great.
much for today. And for our participants, if you're interested in more webinars like this, you can find more on our socials. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.